At my birthday dinner, my wife's family gave gifts to everyone except me. They laughed, so I gave them something that made them regret ever treating me like a joke. The following story was uploaded by a user called Devine_gamer. The moment the first gift crossed the table and landed in someone else's hands, I knew exactly how the evening was going to unfold. It was my 36th birthday, and we were seated in a private room of an upscale restaurant that my wife, Camille, had chosen herself. She'd booked the space weeks in advance, carefully curated the menu, and told me multiple times to let her handle everything because, as she put it, this year's going to be special. The guest list included the usual suspects: Camille's parents, her younger sister, her sister's husband, a cousin who conveniently lived nearby, and a couple of family friends who always seemed to get invited to these things whether it made sense or not. I'd been outnumbered before at family gatherings, so I didn't think much of it initially. Camille's family always traveled in packs. If one was invited, the rest followed like an attached invoice. Dinner began the way it always did with them. Overly polite hellos, a few performative compliments about the food or the ambience, and several jabs disguised as jokes aimed gently in my direction. Her mother asked me for the third time in 6 months if I was still working at that software place, and her father gave me a firm nod instead of a handshake, as though acknowledging I'd managed to show up was worthy of a small award. None of this was new. It was typical of Camille's family. They didn't hate me outright. That would have required emotional energy. They simply kept me in the role of tolerated accessory, present, but not central. I had learned to live with that. I didn't start the night expecting much. In fact, I told myself earlier that morning not to get caught up in expectations. Camille had never been someone who cared much for sentimentality or tradition. Even though this dinner was her idea, I assumed it was more about keeping up appearances than actually celebrating me. Still, I showed up in a blazer she once said she liked, arrived on time, and made the effort to engage with her family even when I already knew what they thought of me behind closed doors. The first indication that something was off came halfway through the second course. Camille's sister pulled a small gift bag from under the table and handed it to her cousin. "Congratulations on the new apartment," she said with a smile. He laughed and reached inside to pull out a keychain and a bottle of wine. Camille's mother leaned across the table and passed an envelope to her son-in-law. "Just a little something for helping us with the deck project," she explained. He thanked her and tucked it into his coat pocket. Then Camille herself reached under the table and pulled out a small velvet box and handed it to her sister. "I saw these last month and thought of you immediately," she said. The box opened to reveal a pair of earrings that clearly weren't cheap. Within the span of 5 minutes, 5 different people received something. Gifts, envelopes, wrapped items, small gestures, but intentional ones. All of them were exchanged in front of me. All of them were presented with smiles and laughter and sentimental backstories. None of them were for me. Not a single box. Not an envelope. Not even a card. I watched Camille's hands closely during this entire process. I waited for her to make eye contact with me, to reach down and say, "And this one's for you." But she didn't. She poured herself another glass of wine, sipped it, and began discussing her sister's earrings like this dinner was some random Tuesday, and not the night her husband was supposed to be the one they were all there to celebrate. The waitress arrived shortly after with the cake I hadn't asked for. A small round vanilla sponge with thick white icing and chocolate letters spelling out my name and age. She set it in front of me with a small sparkler in the center, then turned and asked if anyone wanted dessert menus. Camille laughed and said, "This is all for him." And everyone smiled as the sparkler fizzled down. The cake sat untouched for nearly 10 minutes while the conversation continued. No one sang. No one raised a glass. The sparkler's ashes had cooled by the time I finally reached for the knife and cut myself a slice. I set it on my plate and listened as her family passed around compliments about the food, shared stories about the cousin's new apartment, and discussed vacation plans that clearly hadn't included me in the itinerary. Eventually, someone, her mother, I think, turned to me with a faint smile and said, "Oh, we forgot to get you something. Isn't that terrible?" Camille laughed beside her. Not a loud laugh. Not cruel, but not embarrassed either. She laughed like it was funny, like it wasn't a big deal. I smiled. Just a little. I said, "No problem." That was the moment the evening changed. Only they didn't know it yet. 3 months earlier, I discovered a group chat. It was on Camille's old tablet, which she'd asked me to help reset for her niece. I connected the device to Wi-Fi, opened the settings, and found a notification waiting in one of the messaging apps she had installed. I opened it without thinking, assuming it was spam or leftover junk from a past account. Instead, I found a group message thread labeled "Fam Only Speech Balloon." It was active. Very active. Dozens of messages a day. The members were Camille, her sister, her parents, her cousin, and a few others from her family circle. What I saw in the thread made me feel something I hadn't experienced in years: genuine betrayal. They weren't just chatting about holiday plans or birthdays. They were talking about me. Regularly. Casually. With the kind of tone you use when you're confident the person you're mocking will never hear a word of it. There were messages about how he always tries too hard, and how Camille deserves someone with more ambition. Her sister once called me a placeholder. Her mother said I was harmless enough to keep around for now. Even Camille had joined in, making jokes about my habits, my routines, my dullness. She told them I was reliable, sure, but boring in every way that counts. She mentioned wanting to wait until the timing's right to figure out what she actually wanted from life. At first, I stared at the screen in silence, letting the words sink in. Then I got up, walked into the kitchen, and calmly made a copy of every message. Screenshots. Dated. Sorted. Exported. I sent them to a private email account. I didn't say a word to Camille about what I'd found. Not that night. Not the next day. Not even after another passive-aggressive dinner at her parents' place the following weekend. Instead, I let it fester. I let it shape something inside me that had been trying for years to make peace with their behavior. That peace was dead now. It had been murdered by their own words. I didn't confront her because I wasn't interested in an apology. What I wanted was timing. And now, sitting at that long, candlelit table with a piece of cake going stale in front of me, I had it. I raised my glass. The table quieted, expecting a toast. And I began speaking, not with bitterness, not with emotion, but with precision. I stood up slowly, letting my hand rest on the rim of my wine glass for just a second before raising it. The conversation around the table tapered off. Forks went quiet against plates. Camille looked at me and smiled, clearly expecting a polite thank you for the evening she hadn't actually planned for me. I looked around the table, pausing on each face. Her father, already halfway through his third glass of red wine, stared back at me with mild disinterest. Her mother sat frozen mid-sip, the same rehearsed expression she always wore in public, a blend of smug pride and feigned impatience. Her sister glanced at her phone, then looked up, clearly bored. And Camille, she was still smiling, as if whatever I was about to say would smooth over the evening's strange imbalance and reassure her that I had, once again, accepted the role she and her family had assigned to me. I tapped the glass gently once. "Thank you all," I said, my voice calm and steady, "for being here tonight. I really mean that." Camille leaned slightly toward me and let out a small, relieved laugh. "Of course, babe. Happy birthday again. But before dessert," I continued, "I have a few things I'd like to give out." There was a beat of confusion at the table. A few people exchanged looks. Her sister raised an eyebrow. Her cousin tilted his head slightly. Camille's mother set her wine glass down and adjusted in her seat, suddenly aware that something about my tone had shifted. I reached into the inner pocket of my jacket and pulled out a small stack of envelopes, plain, white, neatly sealed. I held them in both hands and walked around the table slowly, handing one to each person except Camille. Her father looked surprised as he took his. Her sister hesitated before accepting it, already suspicious. Camille's mother looked down at the envelope like it might bite her. Her cousin asked, "What's this?" as I set it in front of him. I returned to my seat and placed the last envelope, thicker than the rest, directly in front of Camille. Her smile faltered as she looked at it. I sat down, folded my hands, and said, "I wanted to give something back, since it seems I was the only one who didn't receive anything tonight." No one spoke. They were reading the envelopes now, opening them, scanning. The first reaction came from her sister, whose lips tightened as she began flipping through the pages. Her cousin frowned, then looked up at me in disbelief. Camille's mother whispered, "What the hell is this?" under her breath, but loud enough for the room to catch it. Her father didn't say a word, just kept reading, jaw set. Each envelope contained selected screenshots from the group chat I had found on Camille's old tablet. Carefully curated, time-stamped, labeled with names and dates, organized in chronological order. There were no opinions, no added commentary, no conclusions written by me. I wanted them to read their own words without any filter. Their jokes, their criticisms, their casual cruelty, all laid bare on paper. Camille hadn't opened hers yet. She was watching their reactions with growing confusion, eyes darting between her sister and her mother, trying to decipher what was happening. Her sister was the first to break the silence. "Where did you get this?" I turned toward her, still completely composed. "From a group chat on Camille's tablet. The one she gave me to reset. The same one you've all been using for the past year to talk about me." Camille's face changed instantly. Her posture stiffened. She reached for her envelope, but stopped short of opening it. "I can't believe you went through my messages," she said quietly. "You handed me the tablet," I replied. "I connected it to Wi-Fi to wipe it clean. It synced automatically. What I found wasn't something I was looking for. It just happened to be there." Her face flushed, either with guilt or embarrassment. It was hard to tell. She finally opened the envelope and began scanning the contents. It didn't take long. The first page was a printout of her own message, sent at 11:08 p.m. on a Thursday night. He's sweet, but God, sometimes I feel like I'm married to a wall. I don't know how much longer I can keep pretending. The second message came a few days later. I don't think I even respect him anymore. Not really, but he's reliable. And I'm not in a place where I can blow everything up. I didn't add notes, highlights, or arrows. The words spoke for themselves. So did the silence that followed. Her father was the one who broke it. You really dug through all of this? To embarrass us? On your birthday? I turned to him, still calm. No, I didn't do this to embarrass anyone. I did this because I wanted everyone to see how they actually speak about the person sitting at this table. The person who has shown up to every family event, who helped pay off Camille's sister's credit card debt, who drove your cousin to his job interviews when his car was in the shop, the guy you all dismissed for years because you thought I was too polite or too boring to notice. Camille's mother spoke next. You're making a scene. Over what? Some jokes. These aren't jokes, I said. These are months, years, of consistent, deliberate disrespect. And Camille knew about it. She contributed to it. Camille tried to interject. I was venting. Everyone vents. That doesn't mean I don't love you. I stared at her for a long moment, measuring the words carefully. If you loved me, you would have defended me. Even once. I combed through hundreds of messages. Not once did you push back. Not once did you say anything kind. You didn't just tolerate what they said. You encouraged it. She looked down at the table. The rest of the room was silent now. No one made eye contact with each other. The dinner plates remained untouched. The cake sat in the middle of the table, candles long gone cold. I'm not here to start a fight, I continued. I'm not here to yell or demand apologies. I just wanted you all to see what it looks like when the person you talk about finally decides to talk back. I stood up. Camille's voice cracked slightly as she asked, what does this mean? Are you leaving me? I didn't answer right away. I collected the few personal items I'd brought with me, adjusted my jacket, and looked at her one last time. What it means, I said evenly, is that I'm done pretending I'm part of this family. That I'm going to keep swallowing my pride just to be near people who clearly think I don't belong. I'm not angry. I'm just done. And with that, I left the room. I didn't slam the door. I didn't turn around to see who followed me. I walked out, leaving the mess exactly where it belonged, on their table, in their hands, written in their own words. After I left the restaurant, I didn't go home. I drove for almost an hour with no destination in mind, just moving, just breathing, just sitting inside the calm that always follows after a long, calculated silence finally breaks. There were no racing thoughts, no nerves, no regrets. It was the first time in years I'd felt absolutely certain of something. That night wasn't an outburst. It wasn't a meltdown. It was an announcement. And I had delivered it precisely the way they never expected, from a place of control, not emotion. Around midnight, I checked into a hotel downtown under a different last name. I didn't want a paper trail Camille could follow, and more importantly, I didn't want to see her face when she came home. Not yet. The truth had landed, and now it was her turn to sit in it. I turned my phone off and slept without interruption for the first time in weeks. When I turned it back on the following morning, there were 27 messages waiting. 8 were from Camille. The rest were split between her sister, her mother, and 2 of her friends who must have been told some version of the story overnight. Camille's first message was short. We need to talk. Please call me. The second was longer. I didn't know you felt this way. I never meant to hurt you. I was trying to keep peace between you and them. I handled it badly. Please let's talk before this becomes something it doesn't have to be. Each message that followed became a little more panicked, a little more desperate. There was a voice memo I never played and a few texts from her mother calling me vindictive and cruel. I ignored all of it. Not because I wanted to punish them, but because I no longer felt like I owed any of them a reply. I had said what I needed to say. They were the ones who had things to answer for. And for once, I wasn't going to be the one showing up with solutions to their problems. Camille came home to an empty closet. I'd moved my things out that morning while she was still at work. I packed carefully, choosing only what was mine and leaving everything else untouched. I didn't want revenge. I didn't want to damage the furniture or take something to make a point. I just wanted a clean break. Before I left, I placed a printed letter on the kitchen table in a plain envelope with her name on it. Nothing dramatic, nothing bitter, just one page, typed. In it, I told her that the person she had described in those messages, the man she was pretending to be happy with, was real. That I had tried, for years, to be someone she could trust, laugh with, and build a future alongside. That I had worked hard, in silence, to earn respect from a family who treated me like a guest in my own marriage. And that, above all else, I had stayed. But now, I was choosing not to. I ended the letter with a simple truth. I didn't hate her. I just couldn't live beside someone who didn't defend me when it mattered. Then I left my house key inside the envelope and walked out for the last time. Over the next week, the messages didn't stop. Camille called daily, often more than once. She tried emails, voicemails, even LinkedIn at one point. She tried showing up to my office, but was politely turned away by reception. I'd already explained the situation to my boss, who gave me a few personal days and told HR to block all outside inquiries to my extension. Camille didn't stop trying, but I had already stopped listening. A few days after the dinner, I received a carefully worded email from her father. He wrote like a man addressing a potential lawsuit, not angry, not apologetic, just calculated. He suggested that I may have overreacted and said he understood emotions were high, but asked that I respect Camille's right to clarify her side of things. He also made a point to mention that sharing private family conversations without consent could be considered damaging, depending on how public the situation becomes. It made me laugh in a bitter, quiet way. That was the first time any of them had ever taken me seriously as a potential threat. I didn't respond, but I did forward the email to my lawyer, just in case. What none of them understood was that I hadn't exposed them for attention or leverage. I hadn't outed their opinions because I wanted to hurt them. I did it because the silence had reached a point where continuing to endure it would have turned me into someone I didn't recognize. I did it for clarity, not revenge. Camille finally stopped reaching out after 10 days. On the 11th, I received a final message. No subject line, just a paragraph. She said she understood now, that I wasn't coming back, that maybe she had taken things for granted, that she never truly believed I would walk away. And then she wrote a sentence that stayed with me for a long time afterward. I always thought you'd choose peace over pride. That sentence told me everything I needed to know. She didn't understand what I'd done at all, because what she called pride was finally choosing myself. The fallout continued quietly. A friend of Camille's I used to speak with regularly sent me a short message days later, saying, "I didn't know they talked about you like that. I'm sorry. You didn't deserve it." That was the only acknowledgement I ever received from someone in their circle. I didn't expect more. You don't get apologies from people who built their personalities around the assumption that you'll always be the one to swallow your feelings first. You just leave, and let the silence be your answer. I filed for divorce the following week. No children, no shared assets beyond the house, no contested finances. Everything was clean, quiet, and efficient. Camille didn't fight it. She didn't try to negotiate. I think, deep down, she knew this wasn't something that could be saved, not after what was said, and definitely not after how she reacted once it came to light. When the final papers were signed, I didn't celebrate. I just sat in my car for 10 minutes and let the weight of 6 years slide off me like a coat I'd worn for far too long. A few months later, I moved into a small rental about 30 minutes outside the city. Nothing fancy. 2 bedrooms, enough space to work, read, sleep, and breathe. I furnished it slowly, piece by piece, choosing only what I needed and nothing more. Camille once said our house never felt like me. She was right. This place did. Because this one wasn't built on compromise. Some nights I still think about that dinner. Not out of regret. Just as a reminder of what it feels like when you finally say the thing you've been holding back for years. There was no applause. No vindication. No dramatic exit music. But there was peace. Real peace. And I hadn't known what that sounded like in a long time. 6 months passed before I saw Camille again. Not in person. Not in some awkward run-in at the grocery store or a planned meeting for closure. It happened online. A tagged photo. Someone I hadn't spoken to in over a year uploaded a group picture from a wedding. Camille was in the background, half smiling, standing next to someone I didn't recognize. Her hair was shorter. Her posture looked different. Like she was forcing confidence the same way someone wears a blazer that doesn't quite fit. I didn't linger on the photo. I didn't click into her profile or read the comments. I closed the app, set my phone down, and returned to whatever I'd been doing before. That was the moment I realized I wasn't angry anymore. Not with her. Not with her family. Not with myself. I was just done. The divorce had been finalized weeks earlier. There was no court battle. No screaming matches or dragged-out settlements. Camille and I signed our names on paper, handed them to our attorneys, and walked out in opposite directions. The whole process had taken less than 4 months. We split the proceeds from the house and closed our joint accounts. She kept the car. I didn't want it. I took a few pieces of furniture that had been mine before the marriage, and the rest went into the sale. Neither of us contested anything. It wasn't an act of grace. It was detachment. When a bridge finally collapses after years of quiet damage, no one fights over the rubble. They just walk away. People talk a lot about closure. The kind that's supposed to come in conversations, final confessions, or long apologies delivered through tears. But I never got any of that. And I stopped expecting it. Camille never asked to meet in person, never wrote a letter, never truly explained why she said the things she did in that group chat, or why she let her family treat me like an accessory she'd forgotten to take off. She didn't offer clarity, and I didn't chase it, because by then, I'd learned the most important truth of all. Closure isn't something you get from someone else. It's what you find when you finally stop asking people who broke you to help you feel whole again. I started new routines after everything ended. Not to move on. I wasn't interested in some symbolic reset. I just wanted my life back. The parts of it that had quietly eroded over time while I was pretending that being tolerated was the same as being loved. I started going to a different gym, signed up for a language class, took long walks in neighborhoods I didn't know, without checking my phone every 10 minutes like I used to. I ate when I was hungry, not when someone else was ready. I slept early without explaining why. I stopped performing. And slowly, without realizing it, I began to feel like a person again. Friends asked me questions, naturally. Some were subtle. A coworker would ask how things were on the home front, just to test the waters. A friend from college sent a text asking if Camille and I were still good, after seeing my social media go quiet. Others were more direct. They wanted to know what happened. If there had been another person. If there was a dramatic fight. If I regretted how I'd handled the dinner. I gave them the short version. She showed me who she was. I believed her. I left. It was enough. The people who understood didn't need more details. The ones who didn't? I stopped keeping them around. Eventually, someone I trusted asked me what hurt them most. Not in a dramatic way. It was a quiet conversation over coffee. No expectations. Just honesty. I thought about it for a while before answering. It wasn't the messages. It wasn't the betrayal. It wasn't even the way her family looked at me like I was something they were just barely tolerating in every room we shared. It was how easy it was for her to laugh with them. That night, at my birthday dinner, when they all gave gifts to each other and left me sitting there, smiling like a fool in front of a cake I didn't want, she didn't just stay silent. She joined in. That was the part one couldn't forget. Not because it broke my heart, but because it broke the illusion I had spent 6 years trying to believe in. She loved me, in her way. I don't deny that. But her love had limits. It didn't stretch far enough to inconvenience her. It didn't show up when I needed defending. It didn't challenge the people who mocked me behind my back while she nodded along. And love like that isn't love at all. It's comfort. It's habit. It's something to hold until something better shows up. I never looked back at the messages. Once the divorce was final, I deleted the folder. Not because I wanted to forget, but because I didn't need proof anymore. They had already convicted themselves. About a year after everything ended, I ran into Camille's cousin. It was at a coffee shop near my new place. We weren't close, but we'd spoken a few times back when I was still part of her family orbit. He recognized me immediately, tried to make conversation, asked how I'd been. I kept my responses short, polite. Then he said something I wasn't expecting. For what it's worth, man, that night. That dinner? You didn't deserve that. I nodded, said thank you. Then I threw out my coffee cup and walked away. Because I didn't need validation. I'd already moved on. Today, I barely think about any of them. Not out of bitterness. Just because they're not part of my life anymore. They became something like furniture in a house I don't live in. A memory of shape and color, nothing more. I still go to dinners. Still attend birthdays. But now, the tables are different. The seats are filled with people who see me. People who laugh with me, not at me. People who don't need to be reminded that respect is the first language love speaks. There's a lot I've let go of. The need to be liked by people who never intended to understand me. The desire to win someone back who never knew what they lost. The fantasy that, given enough time, loyalty alone could fix the absence of real connection. And I replaced all of it with something better. A quiet life. A clean conscience. And a room full of people who don't wait until it's too late to show they care. I don't hate Camille. I don't wish her harm. But I hope, in whatever version of her life she's living now, that she understands what she gave up. Not because I need her to regret it, but because I need her to finally see me clearly. Not as a placeholder. Not as a fallback. But as the man who once gave everything he had to a family who thought silence was strength and cruelty was tradition. And when they all laughed at me for not getting a gift on my birthday, I gave them exactly what they deserved. The truth. And then I left them with it.